of years.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to completely shift how we actually view carbon. We hear about it constantly, right? Usually it's just framed as a modern pollutant. But what if we zoom way out? Carbon is literally the fundamental dynamic engine that makes Earth habitable in the first place. I mean, without it, life as we know it simply doesn't exist.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Earth's Carbon Balancing Act.
To really get this, we have to look at how carbon is constantly moving, trading places and recycling between these massive storage pools across the entire planet. And just look at the staggering scale of these pools, measured here in gigatons. So up top, the atmosphere holds about 720 gigatons. Sounds like a lot, right? But scan down. The terrestrial biosphere has 2,000 gigatons. The ocean, over 38,000 gigatons. And then there's the lithosphere, the literal rocks beneath our feet, holding over 60 million gigatons in sedimentary carbonates. No way, right? So what does this all mean for us? It means our atmosphere holds a tiny, highly sensitive fraction of Earth's total carbon. Basically, it doesn't take much to throw the whole thing off balance.
Because these storage pools are so vastly different in size, the Earth actually operates like this massive engine, running on two totally distinct gears. On one side, you've got the fast biological cycle. This one completes its loops in mere days, seasons, or years. On the other side, you've got the slow geological cycle, a deep planetary gear that literally takes millions of years just to turn a single rotation.
Moving right along to Section 2, the fast biological cycle. Let's start with that first gear, the surface world that we interact with every single day. We can basically trace the fast-paced journey of a single carbon atom moving rapidly through living organisms, soils, and the churning ocean. Picture this. It might start high up in the sky, caught in a raindrop during atmospheric cloud condensation. It falls, washing over a forest canopy where a leaf snatches it up during photosynthesis, turning it into cellulose. Then, when that leaf dies, the carbon travels down into the soil, becoming organic matter. Eventually, rainfall washes it into a river, where it rides the runoff all the way out to sea. It's this incredibly rapid, constant flow of life and death.
But there are hidden forces driving this fast cycle. And get this, viruses actually act as major regulators of this entire system. Yeah, viruses. Through something scientists call the viral shunt, viruses break down bacteria and control roughly 8.6% of the carbon flowing through Earth's ecosystems. That is a massive chunk. They heavily impact marine, freshwater, and terrestrial food webs, basically ensuring that carbon gets recycled back into the system rather than just sinking away to the bottom.
Now for Section 3, the slow, deep cycle.
Now let's plunge into the extreme depths of the Earth. We rarely think about it, but what actually happens to carbon when it gets dragged deep underground? Well, it undergoes an absolutely incredible geological transformation, and that transformation dictates the long-term climate of our entire planet.
Tracking this millions of years timeline, it all starts with tectonic plates slowly crashing together and sinking. This is a process called subduction, and it essentially drags ocean sediments completely full of carbon down into the mantle. Down there, intense, high-pressure compression forces the carbon into entirely new forms. We're talking about creating stable minerals like magnesite, or even super-deep diamonds. Finally, after millions of years trapped inside the rock, a mantle plume carries it back upward, and a volcano forcefully outgasses that carbon back to the surface as CO2.
Imagine being 1,800 kilometers down. The pressure is so extreme that it physically alters carbon's chemical structure, shifting it to what chemists call sp3 hybridization. Basically, it bonds differently, and that makes the molten rock incredibly thick and viscous. Now, this might just sound like a neat little chemical quirk, but it's massive. It matters because it traps huge, staggering deposits of carbon deep inside the Earth's mantle, keeping it safely locked away from the atmosphere.
Which brings us to Section 4. The human disruption.
For thousands of years, this two-speed engine was perfectly, beautifully balanced. But humanity has thrown a massive wrench into the gears. And it's not just about pollution in the way we traditionally think about it. As the research points out, extracting and burning fossil fuels mechanically digs into that slow geological gear, takes vast amounts of deeply buried carbon, and forcefully dumps it directly into the highly sensitive, fast biological gear. We are literally mixing up the timelines.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale and speed of this mechanical transfer, just look at the spike by the year 2020. Atmospheric carbon dioxide absolutely skyrocketed by nearly 52% over pre-industrial levels. In the context of the deep carbon cycle, a shift this massive in just a couple of centuries is basically a blink of an eye.
the engine is suddenly completely flooded. So how exactly are we short-circuiting the system? Well, it's multi-layered. First off, we've extracted roughly 450 gigatons of ancient fossil carbon. That's huge. But we also release carbon when we heat limestone to manufacture cement, a process called calcination. On top of that, land use changes and deforestation are actively removing the very trees that normally absorb that carbon. And finally, we manufacture halocarbons. These are synthetic gases that don't even exist in nature, but act as insanely potent greenhouse gases.
Now, the Earth is trying its best to compensate by partitioning our emissions. The fast cycle is quite literally working overtime. The oceans and the terrestrial biosphere actually buffer our disruption by absorbing about half of the excess carbon we pump out. But, and this is a big but, this comes at a really steep cost. Pushing all that extra carbon into the water is dangerously lowering ocean pH, shifting it toward acidity, and fundamentally altering marine chemistry in ways that severely threaten coral reefs and entire food webs.
So, we have to ask the ultimate question. How does this grand planetary machine actually end? Well, according to the data, in about 1 billion years, as the sun ages and grows hotter, our oceans are going to evaporate. And without water to lubricate the crust, plate tectonics will permanently seize up. Volcanoes will die out, and this incredible, life-giving carbon cycle will finally grind to a complete halt. It really makes you realize just how precious and finely tuned this temporary, beautifully complex system truly is. So what part will we choose to play while the engine is still running?